Well, thank you everybody for coming along to tonight's session, both here in the Healy room at Albion and online. Looking forward to a good night, and we've got Cameron Gyss here again, and he's going to share some more of his knowledge around sports psychology and how it can help us as umpires. So Cameron, all yours.
The comment that you might be muted, Matt.
I'm muted, but the room is that on red?
Yeah, can you guys hear the discussion in the room?
Yes.
Online?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Awesome. So I'll hand over to Cameron.
I'll just share my screen.
Thank you. Do you want to shut the door? Karen?
Everyone see that? Yeah. So thanks
Yes.
everyone for coming in person and online. I appreciate it. It's, 7 p.m. long days, so to make the effort to come, it's very much appreciated. Today we'll be following on from our first session, which is what we talked about, discussing mental tools. So what kind of mental skills and processes we can utilize to build resilience. And I thought we'd start off with a little bit of a mental skill, right? A mental tool, which is this idea of grounding. So for those of you online, you can just follow the, guidance that I'm going to provide. And for you here, what I'd like you to do is just kind of sit up in your chair, try and get into a relatively alert posture. So kind of back straight, or imagine there's a piece of string going from the top of your head to the roof, hands in your lap. And if you feel comfortable, I'd ask that you just gently close over your eyes. And we'll start the practice with a few deep breaths, right? So really practicing inhaling as strongly as possible, holding at the top and out to the mouth. So now I'd ask that with your eyes closed, we bring attention. Right? So keep your eyes closed. I'd ask that you bring attention to how it feels in your body right now. What sensations are present? You just might make a note. You feel tired, you feel stressed, you feel relaxed, calm. See if you can just scan your body and notice what's there, what's present. You might also notice the content of your mind. Maybe you're present in this exercise right now, maybe you're distracted. Not trying to change it, just noticing where your mind's at. You might give it a label. Maybe it's on work, maybe it's on this exercise. From there, I'd ask that you bring attention to sound. Right, so see if you can just listen to the sounds that are present inside the room and outside the room. And if you notice that you're being distracted by thinking, that's fine. You might just give that a name, thinking, and gently return your attention back to sound. I'd also ask that maybe you notice the experience of touch, right? So notice your back pressing against the chair. Notice your butt's on the seat. Push your feet into the ground. Wiggle your toes. Notice how that feels. Right now, I'd ask that you open your eyes. Maybe just take a look around, scan the room. Maybe pick one or two objects that you can notice the colors. And see if you can re-engage back into this moment, fully present and focused on what we're doing. So we'll get back into this grounding exercise as a bit of a mental skill and talk more about it, but that's just, I guess, to try and have an experience of what we're talking about, of going from a busy mind, maybe you've carried some stress into the day and having a process where you can, I suppose, let that go and refocus on the here and now. Like we said, the aims of these workshops to build knowledge of resilience with the biopsychosocial elements of resilience. And then tonight, we're trying to introduce some mental skills and processes that can help build that. In terms of a recap of that first workshop, I think the key takeaways were that resilience is a skill that we can develop and enhance through training our brain and giving our brain the right conditions to be resilient. So we talked about optimizing nutrition, hydration, sleep, exercise, caffeine. Where's my voice coming through there? We also spoke about developing and maintaining strong and supportive relationships. And I know you came in and you said, sharing a problem, it's a problem shared is a problem thirded. And that's what we're talking about here. Like if you are struggling, having that ability to share what's going on and getting some support is really important in being resilient. And then tonight, we'll talk more about those kind of mental skills, those individual processes that we can optimize that might be helpful. So I think in the lead up to this workshop, I reached out to Murray and I had a chat with Matt just around what are some areas that are challenging in your context. So being able to quickly recover following, potential mistakes or decisions that you may have been unsure about, conflict with players, just this ability to be able to maintain your focus through innings, days and weeks, like obviously that endurance component, being able to cope well with reviews, overturns and escalated behavior. And then there's another one in there, dealing with social media. And that didn't show up much in the first workshop, but I think still useful, particularly for those umpires, maybe in the high grades, they might have to face some of that. And so, we'll briefly touch on that. The first skill or the first process that I think is really valuable, and I'm sure you guys have heard this notion before about controlling the controllables, I think is a really good place to start. And it's more of an overarching tool that we can take going into high pressure situations or situations that we know are going to be challenging. So what is this, process? Basically, you're analyzing factors of an upcoming performance that are fully in your control versus those that you don't have full control over. And in that explicit process, it can help prime your brain to attend to the things that actually matter that you can control instead of, the habitual nature of our mind to kind of try and control the things we can't, and then we worry and then we get stuck in the future and it can be unhelpful. So again, why we would do this, it's a primer. If we can do an exercise explicitly like this, we can prime our brain to keep focused on the controllable aspects. And if we can do that with increased focus on the controllable aspects of the task, ideally we get a better performance. And I think by keeping our attention locked on to those controllable aspects, it does reduce some of the uncertainty that comes from focusing on things that are outside of our control, which means less chance for worrying, which means less chance for anxiety and being overwhelmed by that sense of pressure that might come. So when would you actually do this process? I think in the lead up to situations, to matches, it could be, it's a really intense match and it's going to come down to the wire and you have your drinks break, you can do it then. So it's just, if you're anticipating a very challenging situation, you could try it then, before a match or during a match. If you notice that you're worrying and overthinking in the lead up to an upcoming match or experiencing significant anxiety or fear, it could be useful then. And again, this, we're talking about the umpiring context, but I think this is a useful skill to be resilient in life as well. If there's a difficult life situation that you're facing and you notice that you're ruminating about it or worrying about it, you can't let it go, you might be able to try something like this, an explicit exercise like this, to just help, improve your resilience to that situation. I think that there's benefit in programming in as part of a mental preparation exercise for some of those higher pressure matches. So rather than just kind of leaving it up to chance or, or what was that exercise that we did with Cam, actually structuring it into some of your processes, I think is useful, particularly in the first stages. And then you start to know it so well that you don't need to do it. So we're going to go through this, but in terms of how, it's pretty simple. You put two columns. What can I control? What are the factors related to my performance that I can control? And you list those. And then you go to the right-hand side. what are the factors that are outside of my control? And you list those. And I think there's also benefit in trying to circle of those controllable factors, which actually requires your attention and focus, which is the priority here. Going into this event, this situation, what is the most functional thing for me to focus on? And then you can do the same for the right-hand side. Like what are the things that I'm really getting stuck on here? Am I worried about how I'm going to feel? Am I worried about this particular player's behavior? And circling those just to try and identify and clarify what's actually getting you stuck. I think there's utility in that. And again, so we're looking at factors related to your performance. So that's the context. It's not general, it's specific to your performance as an umpire. So what I ask you guys to do now, guys online and guys here, is if you can, and if you need a piece of paper, you can do it on your phone. Just let's go through it, right? So what are some of those factors related to your performance that are in your control? Let's start there. So you can just kind of do this columns in your workbooks. And I'll give you guys maybe 3 or 4 minutes to really reflect on what are those factors related to my performance that are fully 100% in my control, not 99, not 98, not 50, fully under my control. Maybe we'll just go for another 30 seconds. Might stop there. So I think we'll start with the guys in the room. What was some of the factors related to your performance that you think is fully under your control?
Pitch preparation.
Preparation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's 100% in your control. Yeah. And some of those things we talked about in the first workshop, being well hydrated, being well fueled, getting good sleep, maintaining some exercise. You know, these are fully things that you can do to prepare your brain to be ready to perform well. Anyone else?
Behavior.
Behavior. Yes. I mean, that is generally something that, yeah, we have full control over. Now, for your context, what are some of those behaviors that are really important for you to control and execute well?
Besides your appearance, how you actually, when going to a game, appearing like in a professional manner,
Mm-hmm.
not just rocking up in a singlet and going, oh, I'm here, I'm
Mhm.
here today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Actually making an effort to appearance up,
Mhm.
basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and keep putting forward a good appearance and behaving professionally.
Yeah.
Those are two really important factors. Absolutely, they're in your control. Yeah. Anyone else? Being on time. Yeah. What about in terms of your ability to do your task really well? What are some of those factors?
Concentration.
Concentration, attention. And if anyone's got attention, I would circle that. That's really that at the crux of what you guys are doing, and your abilities to do it well is your ability to attend to the right things at the right time, consistently, with various different internal and external distractions and difficulties that are going to arise. So that's the most important thing, I think. And we do have full control over it. Yes, the mind's going to, like, when we're doing the grounding exercise, we're trying to attend to the exercise, right? Ideally, I'm sure some of you probably, weren't. But and what happens? We get distracted, and the mind chirps up. The thoughts get, pop up from our brain. Difficult feelings arise, and what happens? Our attention gets lost. But we have the ability to train to be able to bring that back faster and faster and refocus faster and faster. It's just, that's something that we can control. We can't necessarily control when it ducks off, but we can control how quick we refocus and get onto the next bowl and the next over or the next inning. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think, attention's a big one. Anyone else? Any other important factors?
Yeah, Cameron, just on
Yep.
what you spoke about, where you don't know you've lost concentration, therefore that's arguably out of your control, and invariably it's 3 or 4 whatever number of balls before you realise to allow yourself to then bring it back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How?
Yeah, so it's
how
like
do you
we
get
can't
over
necessarily
that?
control the distraction in the first instance. But when we do notice or
Yeah.
we observe that we have been hooked by a thought or distracted by a feeling or an external situation, we can choose, and it is under our control to redirect attention. Of course, like Novak Djokovic, the tennis player, he speaks really well about this. He says the mind is a time traveler, right? It wants to jump forwards to what's to come, and it wants to jump back about what's just happened. And that's normal. We're going to lose focus, lose attention at many different times across a match. But and he said in the early stages of his career, he would get really pissed off and angry and upset with himself. Like, why did you lose focus? You haven't been focused the past two points, 3 points, or the past set. Like, what's wrong with you? But then he realized you can't control fully, that process, but you can orient yourself to try and refocus when you've been distracted as best as you can.
Yep.
And we can build our awareness, I suppose, of noticing and our ability to notice when we've been distracted through meditation practices, mindfulness practices, whatever that might look like for you, where we're training our concentration, our attention ability.
Okay, thank you.
Is that helpful?
Oh, I was hoping for the answer of how you stop losing concentration in the first place, but I get what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, no worries. But yeah, really good question. Really good question. Any other factors at play that are fully under your control that are related to your performance?
Your decision-making process.
Yes, absolutely. You're executing the process that you've trained well, that you know well, that you trust, that going through that process as best you can in the moment is under your control. Now, whether that's right or wrong is based on a lot of factors that are outside of your control. But we'll get to that. Was there someone online who had?
Steve's got his hand up.
Yeah, Steve.
Cameron, that question about how do you stop losing focus or attention? I suffer from that. We probably all do. But one little trick I've that helps me is once the ball is dead, I say to myself, what just happened? Where did the ball go? Where did it hit the bat? All that sort of, or how far away from I have to replay the ball in my head. And if I can't, and this is immediately after it's happened, if I can't, I know my focus is drifting. And it's just a reminder that I'm slipping in my concentration or attention. So that's my little trick. Doesn't work all the time, but I try to work it into my routine to go, what just happened? Even if, just the batter never even offered a stroke, it just went straight through to the keeper.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And that's an example of using kind of cue words or a cueing process, right? Where we're utilizing self-talk and the way that we're responding to ourselves to redirect our attention to useful functional processes. So yeah, I think cue words is a very useful technique or strategy, and that's something we can control, right? And if we have those processes, it boosts, or I guess it reduces the chance that we're going to be lost in terms of our attention for long periods of time. Like if you have a process before a bowl and after a bowl that is guiding your attention to the right place at the right times, and that's automated, you're probably in good stead to stay focused. If you don't have those processes, it might be 3 or 4 bowls go by and you're like, fuck, where was I? I was lost in my mind and thought, thinking, and daydreaming. So for what you guys do, those mental processes are vital, and they are, yes, fully within your control. And you want to turn those into really strong habits. So they're not effortful. You don't have to think about it. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't have to. That's not effortful. It's an automatic pattern that you wake up, you brush your teeth, before you go to bed, you brush your teeth. It's just automatic. And sometimes that takes 28, 30 days to build that habit, but once it's built, you're sweet. So yeah, really good point.
Shay's got his hand up. Shay, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great stuff. Yeah, thanks, Cameron. I just now. Yeah, this is well before you do your game. I think personal development is under your control, and yeah, developing yourself in terms of like what we're doing right now, in terms of trying to go through your session and having the sort of knowledge gains and skill gains of personal development rather than just sort of like aspects related to to cricket or umpiring. So I think if one does that continuously, then it is under your control, and it actually gives one more confidence in sort of other aspects of your life. So what I'll say is that personal development is under your control. The other thing is that developing skills to block unwanted distractions, that's under your control. So that's we talked about attention. So really, we can develop skills to block unwanted distractions. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, really good point. And that's what we're talking about, these processes. It's not necessarily like the language of blocking, but it's I want to be really clear and direct and precise with my attention, so that nothing can get in the way and mess with that. Like if those attentional processes are so hardwired and so straightforward, they're resilient to lots of distractions. And like you said, what's in your control, and it is kind of related to your performance in a way, is engaging in personal development, working on your well-being, maintaining good mental health, having a mentality that I'm trying to continue to get better at whatever it is I do. Like I think that's really important. We'll get to that this idea of a growth mindset that, you know, my worth as an umpire isn't dictated on one game, you know, one mistake, one innings, one match. It's like I'm constantly growing. I'm in the process of growing, and those challenges I'm facing are useful for me to actually get better and better and better. And so that's, I think, what you're touching on a little bit as well, is being committed to consistently trying to get better at what you do, in cricket and outside of cricket. Is that fair? It would take the science of the yes. I think that's a pretty good start. I mean, really for me, the key ones are attention, behavior, preparation, process. Like they're all the things that we can control, and that's really useful to use our mental energy on those things. Now, it doesn't always happen that way. And so I'm sure there are aspects about what you do that worry you, that are concerning, that take up a lot of your mental space at times. And a lot of those things are out of our control. And the reason why they take up so much space is our brain doesn't like uncertainty. You know, think about COVID and how that impacted everyone. We didn't know what you know, how's this going to turn out? So there's this background stress and tension on our nervous systems because our brain is trying to figure out what's going to happen, what's next after this, what's going on, and it tries to problem solve. And so when something's out of our control that we don't like, our brains can get stuck on that problem solving process, and it can drain our attentional resources in really unhelpful ways. But if we stick to the umpiring context, I'll give you guys 2 or 3 minutes to just think about what are some of those factors that you might dwell on that are actually outside of your control. Let's do 30 more seconds. Good trick would be to think about what you worry about.
Yeah.
And then they'll come through. Might leave it there. So if there's anyone online, wants to put their hand up and share, or anyone here that wants to do the same, what do you guys think? What are some factors that are related to your performance that you don't have full control over? Weather. Yeah. That's brutal, isn't it?
Has been this year.
Yeah. Yep, can't control the weather. Can control hydration process, fueling.
Player behaviour.
Player behavior. I'd probably circle that one, right? That's a big challenge for you guys. And it's one that probably you guys would worry about if, you know, if there's certain players I'm sure that carry on a little bit. Yeah.
You get
Everyone in
spectators do
everything.
the same thing
Yeah.
too, so.
Player behavior is a big one. What else?
Ground conditions.
Ground conditions.
Pitch conditions,
Yep,
yeah.
ground conditions. Yep. Stephen.
You can't control the state of the game, whether it's tense or whether it's a non-event. Now, when it's tense, you know, everyone's on edge and the pressure's on. You can't control that. Whether the game is, you know, a cliffhanger or boring as batshit. Just got to go with it.
Yeah, it's a very good one. Lee.
Yeah, more a basic one. I can't control the bowler and what the ball does or what the batter does. And because that's the whole beauty of the game, of course. You know, the batter's going to do some stupid move or something like that. Sort of, or the ball does something out of the ordinary. I can't control that.
No. Really good one. No control. Anyone else? No? Are they the typical things that maybe play on your mind during a match?
Oh, no, the veracity of some of the appellants. So some of the appeals can get pretty vocal and go on and on and on.
Mhm.
So that's some out of your control and does put pressure on you, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it makes sense that it does. And, you know, that combined with some of the stuff that Steve was talking about, the tension of the game,
Yeah,
the pressure
well,
of the
that's
game, like those things
Plays
are
in a
kind of
way.
tied into one another. Now, a question that I'd like to put forward to you is to think about maybe where your mind typically goes. Like if you had to put to a ratio, before a match, I'm 100% focused on my controllables and 0% out of my control. Or maybe I'm 50-50, or maybe I'm 60-40. What percentages would you put on how much mental energy goes into focusing on the controllables compared to what's out of your control?
Started before the game started.
Yeah, before the game start, or even just throughout a match, just in general, on average.
It varies.
Varies.
You have there's nothing in front of you before you've started the game. And then as the game progresses, or you get out there in the game, you should be 100% at the controllables. And then from time to time during the game, you probably drift a bit.
Yeah,
I know I do.
Yep, there's a drifting process.
But you hope to think that you're pretty much on cue most of the time. You're never going to be there I don't believe you're ever going to be there all the time. No one's that good.
No.
But you do your best to try and maintain the focus for as long. And that means, to me, it means that's between what I umpire at both ends. I'm on my own. So like I learned to do nothing between balls. So as soon as the bowler starts his runner, you start concentrating from that point on.
Yeah.
And that to me helps me maintain my concentration at the important times. That's the way I deal with it anyway.
All the things we talked about that are beyond our control, we're going to notice them all. If we weren't noticing them all, I don't think we'd be doing our job. But I think where the challenge is to notice them and then come back to what the controllable response is.
Yeah.
To that.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be 100% on the controllables.
No.
And for that reason, I don't think it should be.
Well,
yeah, it's about how quickly you come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about it, like what genuine benefit is there in your role to be dwelling and worrying about and spending your attentional resources on those factors that's outside of your control? Really, there's none.
Yeah, but Cameron, isn't it the exact opposite to that? I can control what I can control. So my concentration is very much focused on what's out of my control, because I'm looking for the the ball. I'm looking for the ball. I'm looking for the bat. I'm listening to the players. My situational awareness is everything that I can't control.
Yeah, but you're not. I would say there's a difference between being aware of those things in relation to performing your task as an umpire versus worrying about those things or being consumed by what's going on outside.
I thought I heard the question as was concentrating the percentage moving from what's in your control to what's out of your control.
Yes. So I asked that question about a ratio. So
Right. So I'd say
ideally
30-70 arguably sort of thing.
Yeah, 30-70. So that's
Focusing on what's out of my control though.
So if I'm 30% of the time locked into the controllables and 70% of the time I'm dwelling and worrying about and spending my mental energy on those factors that are outside of my control. My idea is that it's not the most functional way of attending in a game, and I think maybe where there's some confusion is on whether those factors are I've lost my train of thought. I think there's confusion in relation to whether I'm trying to control those uncontrollables or whether I'm just aware of them and they're just a part of my mental processes and what I should be concentrating on, if that makes sense. Yes, I can't control the bowler and the batter, but I need to be aware of those things. But if I'm trying to worry about what if the batter does this or what if the bowler does this, or that's what I'm talking about more so.
Yeah, okay. Tough.
The difference between being aware of those things as opposed to worrying about
yes.
them.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what, was it Stephen or Lee was looking at as well.
Yeah,
but does
I
that
wouldn't
make sense?
necessarily. I understand you now differentiating. I wouldn't call worrying about it. I was just saying being very conscious of it because that's the whole purpose of being there. Yeah,
Be
okay,
alert,
thank you.
not alarmed.
Indeed. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Also, there's someone I'll get back to you if you put your hand up in the thing. Yeah.
Sometimes something uncontrollable comes along and it kickstarts a whole new area that you have to control. So a lot of different mechanisms. Like on Saturday, there's a schools game on before my game. Second last over of that game, batsman fell over and dislocated his knee. So we couldn't start on time. Got two teams wanting to start, but we couldn't start on time because there was a child lying in the middle of the cricket pitch waiting for an ambulance. And we've got two teams, first and second, wanting to have at it.
So in that case, it's like, well, what can you control that situation? Well, I can control my behavior, my response, the way that I deal with those people, but I can't control how they reacting, responding. Online.
Yeah, share here again. Yeah, so fully understand that we talk about not being able to control the batter and the bowler per se, but there are situations we can't control, altercation between two players, some thing that occurs between two players, and sometimes that kind of plays one's mind if there is a situation between two players, and it could actually fester and it could continue through the game. You can't control it, but it does actually impact. Certainly would impact my performance in terms of thinking, how is this going to plan out? How is this going to sort of follow through for the rest of the innings or throughout the game? Because it could actually happen that these two individuals actually do something to each other in between the innings, or have some verbal sort of confrontation in between the innings, or something. So those sort of things. I mean, it has happened a couple of times where players are sort of at each other's not throat, but I think are disagreeing with each other, but then you get sort of foul language flying around as well. That you can't control it, but it's impacting your performance because you kind of feel that what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and it's a perfect example of those situations where it's completely understandable that your mind gets lost and it goes to that situation, it worries about that situation, and your attention gets taken off the task at hand, and it has a negative performance impact. So it's completely understandable, but it's exactly what we're talking about. In those situations, it's about being able to let go of that stuff. Like, you can't control whether they get into a fight. You can't control their behavior. And through having those mental processes in that redirect your control to the task at hand, that's what we're talking about, is developing the capacity to do that when there's some of those situations that have the tendency to impact your ability to focus. But it's a great example. Does that make sense, Shay?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, cool. Anything else on that you think is important to bring up? No. But yeah, I think we want to develop mental routines, processes, skills that allow us to keep staying on that left-hand side as much as we can, because that's where good performance is going to happen ultimately. In terms of what you guys do, there's additional tips. You know, a lot of people say my performance is fully under my control. And if that was true, you'd never make a mistake, you'd never make an error. Everything would always be great because we'd always force ourselves to have good performance. We can't. You know, there are so many different factors at play in terms of our physiology, in terms of our concentration, in terms of our personal life that are going to impact that end output of a performance. So we can't force it, but we can increase the probability of performing to our potential by continuing to identify and focus on the right things at the right time, and letting go and actively letting go of factors outside of our control when we notice our mind's been stuck there. And we talk about the right things, just whatever controllable aspects of performance, attentional and physical, are most functional and most important at a specific time. Does that make sense? So recovery from mistakes and conflict. So we talked about this idea of a growth mindset. So understanding that mistakes and challenges are going to arise and they're opportunities for me to learn and grow. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be, you know, infallible. I can make mistakes and it's okay. Because when we have that mindset, we're less self-critical and we're less likely to get stuck in those self-critical thought patterns, which come with the, you know, guilt and shame and humiliation and all that kind of stuff. So we want to avoid that. And a growth mindset is a useful mechanism of trying to avoid some of those things. And yeah, it also refers to a sharper focus on just the processes and getting the processes right and continuing trying to optimize the processes instead of being so outcome focused. Because if we're really just outcome orientated, it can lead to that increased emotional response when mistakes do happen. So this is an idea of a bit of a top-down approach for resilience, right? So controlling some of the ways our mind is framing things, cognitive processes, which can then, if they're healthy and functional, we don't experience so much of the difficult emotional stuff that might come with the other way around. Lee, you got your hand up?
Yep, just I hear you and I agree with what you're saying, and my self-talk is, okay, you might have got that wrong, but you're a good umpire, try and move on. But it is then difficult when the players are added to the mix and they're from the bottom up, making it very clear, potentially over a couple of overs, that you got one wrong. How do you act on that? Is it the same answer?
Well, I suppose is your perception and analysis of yourself as an umpire and your performance, is that governed by your own perceptions, or are you allowing those external perceptions to impact that?
Well, probably both, because I try and get things right, and when you make a decision and players are clearly saying to you, well, you got that wrong, and then next over, let's hope you get this one right, that pressure. How do you deal with that?
Well, I guess it's it's a good question. It's coming into this about being able to understand that it's okay to make mistakes. I think what you're talking about is being impacted by maybe that aggression or that
Yes.
negative energy from other players.
Yeah.
Dave's got his hand up. I think Dave might have something good to add in there.
Yeah, Dave, if you've got something to add, that would be useful.
Hello all. So yeah, good discussion points here. So I'd just like to address decision errors and some of this behavior talk. I think if we all sit back from time to time and give some real serious thought to what we will accept and won't accept on a cricket field, going into each weekend is going to hold you in a lot better stead. So if you think you're not going to accept swearing at someone's, the top of someone's voice, then we already know that. So if someone does it, they're making a rod for their own back, aren't they? Straight away, we can go to the captain. Sorry, this is what he's done. We're not having that. If you're going to accept other, like say, physical abuse or something else within the game, again, if we accept that, then we're probably going to get a bit more of that. But once we know what we will accept and what we won't accept, it's going to make our job a lot easier than if we know that. Decision-wise, if we have players telling us 2 and 3 overs later, you've got that wrong, then we can try and turn that around on them. And again, it's like, well, hang on. Okay, I've got that wrong, but we're not going to be up on this for the next 3 hours. You guys make mistakes. Why can't I? So knowing what you will accept and what you won't accept is really going to help you deal with players. So I thought that might be helpful to share with the group.
Yeah, well, I guess what you're speaking about is having really clear boundaries as an umpire,
Yeah.
and being able to, and then having clear communication and verbal processes that enforce those boundaries. And if those are really clear, then there's not much stress, right? Because it's just simple. It's that behavior is being executed. So you go to what the communication is that and you've planned.
And that's right. The communication the communication you planned. Like you might have, I don't know, like just say it's a bowler run by how many balls to go? Automatically you say 2 to go. Like you already know that in your head. If there's some conflict, how are you going to deal with it? Maybe it is that decision error we've already flagged that we've got wrong. And we've got a couple of bowlers behind us at mid-on, mid-off, and they're talking about it and they're sort of, yapping a little bit. Well, having some language to deal with that already in place, so when it does happen, again, it's going to hold you in better stead, so you can cut it off at the knees straight away. And even, as I said, if it's acknowledging, yep, got it wrong, guys, we're not harping on it for the next 3 hours, though. It's done. So you give yourself a lot better chance of getting through the day, or in an easier sort of frame of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. I think we've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try and get to that because I think I do speak a little bit on that later on. So, I think when we're faced with some of that challenging behavior, our brain responds accordingly, right? A threat has popped up in our environment in a way when we're getting, attacked. So our brain responds with the fight, flight, freeze system, right? We get that little tense, little stress. And yeah, I think being able to have some process that helps take the edge off a little bit. We don't want to get into a tug of war with our emotional state, but can just help us go from that threat state back into I'm in control is useful. And so, I've got down there a physiological sigh, which we'll talk about, being able to reground ourselves, like we talked about, back into our sensory experience, right? What we can touch, taste, smell, hear, see. Like if I'm connected and I'm fully attentive to my sensory experience in a moment, guess what I'm not doing? I'm not up here and I'm not in here trying to control. So that being able to take a little bit of the edge off, reground myself in the present moment, and then re-engage in the task from that place of being a little bit calmer and a little bit more grounded can be useful. And when I was talking about recovery, I'm not talking about being fully calm and relaxed and I've just had 2 beers, I'm in the bath and wonderful. It's about actually having the capacity to refocus well. That's all. So when we talk about a physiological side, there's a lot of neuroscience going into kind of respiratory science, which is really useful at the moment. And, you know, this has come out of it. So it's a simple breathing technique that stimulates our vagus nerve, right, from our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest component of our nervous system, which can help slightly reduce our experience of stress and anxiety. So it's, you know, it's an enforced sigh of relief, essentially. Like we do this automatically when we're pissed off or whatever, we just, you know, and it's not even a conscious thing. We're doing it to try and, you know, ease off a little bit of that stress. So it only takes 1 to 2 rounds, and just to take the edge off a little bit. So how it works is it's a really strong inhale through the nose, and then another one on top. And you can just notice a little bit of an edge off. So online, I want you guys to practice maybe 2 or 3 rounds. And in here, 1, 2. You notice a little subtle shift in the room? Yeah. Online?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, it's just it's a quick little tool. You know, you don't want to get lost in, okay, I'm doing fucking 10 minutes of deep breathing to try and calm down, because it's not functional, right? I need to be able to just quickly take the edge off and refocus, so it can help in that sense.
Then you've got to start worrying about overrides.
Yeah. So, and I really like this idea that it's common, right? We get into a tug of war with our emotional experience, particularly if it's stress, anxiety. We want to solve it, we want to fix it. You know, that might look like I got to drink some beers. It might look like I got to go for a walk. It might look like I got to take myself to the gym, whatever it is. In the context of in a stressful, tense, pressure environment, we've got to actually make room for some of that. We've got to make room that I'm doing something I care about. This is the part of that, and I don't have to do anything about it. So when I'm talking about engaging and breathing in this physiological sigh, it's just to create some space and to help refocus, not to control and eliminate emotional discomfort, stress, anxiety, because this ends up being a tug of war, right, which we often lose, and it keeps our focus on our mental and emotional experience instead of the task at hand. So if you think about, this anxiety monster shows up while I'm trying to umpire, right? It's not comfortable, right? I mean, it's this increased heart rate. Maybe I got sweaty palms, racing thoughts, and I got to get rid of this anxiety. So I'm in this tug of war all of a sudden, and there's this huge bottomless pit between us. I'm trying to fucking get rid of that anxiety. I never want to see it again. I want to get rid of it, because if I can't get rid of it, I can't focus on this game. So I've got to get rid of it. So I'm in this tug of war. Where's my attention? On that, on the monster, and I got to get rid of it. So in trying to eliminate discomfort emotionally, I can get stuck on focusing more and more onto that. So instead of getting in the tug of war, we want to drop the rope, right? And a physiological sigh and a grounding process can help that, because I'm coming back out into my external experience of reality, not what's happening inside. Does that make sense? Yeah, so we want to try and avoid that tug of war. We talked about grounding, right? So just shifting attention from my internal experience to my present moment sensory experiencing. And in doing that, it quiets the mind. We practice this at the start, moving from noticing, okay, what's going on? How am I feeling? And then back to listening, touch, you guys have beautiful surroundings some of the time where you can look around, open up your vision to encompass, nature and what's going on. That's useful. Why? It helps us redirect attention back to where it matters. So if I'm coming from that grounded place, I can retake control over my attention better than if I'm in that tug of war. If I'm in the tug of war, I'm stuck internal, mental, emotional. If I'm grounded, I can then, okay, what's my next task? And I can more easily reconnect to that. And I can act as a bit of a circuit breaker for unhelpful thought, feeling, behavior patterns. So when I notice I'm stuck on those uncontrollables or those worries of what might happen, I can use that. I'll skip through this a little bit. So we're running out of time, but thinking about that mental endurance piece, I mean, we need to have those switch on processes, mental processes, cue words, things that help us become fully focused and immersed in the task in that moment. And then we need switch off processes. So being able to actually, okay, the ball's finished, I can relax now. And those are really important to be able to be endurant and resilient over the course of a match. If I'm uptight for that whole time, I'm going to burn out. I'm going to spend all my emotional, mental resources, my attentional resources too quickly. So I actually have to be quite good at getting up and focused and then coming down and relaxing. And having clear process is important. And I would have liked to spend a bit more time, but maybe that's something you guys can do in your time when you get together. If like, how do you switch on? How do you switch off? I think that's a really important discussion that you guys would benefit a lot from. So switching off during a match, how do we give our brain a break? We've got to think about our brain a little bit like a feedback loop. Sometimes it gets stuck. And when we're stressed and excited, our respiration quickens, right? We go into that fight, flight, freeze. Our respiration quickens or stops, and our vision narrows. If there's a threat in our environment, that's really functional. I get really focused. My blood moves to my muscles. I'm ready to fight that threat. But we want to be able to reduce some of that. And so to calm our brain and nervous system, we can slow our breath. So we can use that physiological sigh, and we can broaden our vision. So rather than, we do this all the time, right? We're on our phones, we're on our laptops. We've got this narrow gaze, fucking 99% of our day-to-day life, which isn't healthy for our nervous system. And that's why we get home, we're fatigued, and then we watch TV with narrow gaze. We weren't built like that. That's why going for a walk or going to watch a sunset is so relaxing, because we experience this panoramic vision. And that acts as a bit of a feedback loop for our brain to relax. We're safe. If I can scan my environment with that wider view and that relaxed gaze, it can have an impact on how my nervous system functions. Does that make sense? And so you can use that, in those switching off processes. Relax the gaze, see the whole environment, see the trees, see the broad panoramic view, as opposed to because you need to fucking focus in on the ball, right? You need to have the opposite really well, and that taxes the nervous system. So being able to kind of come in and then come out, switch on and then switch off. And that's, mindfulness, I think, is an important process for you guys to try and apply to your context, doing that. Switching on, right, just clarity of process, cue words. I'm not going to go through that. Therefore, switching off post-match, I think having some tools there is really important. So a reflective practice, what I do well, in terms of my umpiring, what's an area that I could have improved, maybe with some conflict, and I thought I could handle that better, and how am I actually going to do that? And then you might have a journal where you fill that in afterwards, shut the book. It's done now. Now I can relax. Now I can enjoy my home life, or this hobby that I've been doing, or this TV show. I've finished with the game. If we don't have a process like that and something bad happens or something stressful happens, our mind can play it over and over and over again. And we can be harder on ourselves than actually trying to have a functional reflective practice. Getting changed, having I get home and I have a shower, I get out of my umpiring clothes, and that's done for the day. I think almost a symbolic process like that can be helpful. Similar with work. If you get home from work, you stay in your work gear, if your laptop's right there, it's almost like we don't shut off fully. If I get changed, have a shower, put my work stuff away, maybe I'll go for a walk or whatever, I can fully switch off and relax. Yeah, and I think knowing what helps us prepare, we talked about that before, about having some pre-match processes, you know, all the stuff we talked about in the first workshop. This is just wanted to speak on just like having clear processes, right? Being able to know how you want to communicate with those difficult behaviors, boundaries, and yeah, I think that's probably that's a whole nother workshop, right, where you can talk about what your boundaries are, how you want to behave, your values of dealing with some of those conflicts, and how you want to be, and just clarifying that process. Because I think the more that's clear, the less stressful it is. If I know this is how I deal with all these situations, it's easy. You got a response right there versus, oh fuck, what am I going to do? And yeah, just in terms of social media, right? So humans are tribal creatures. You know, back in the day before civilization, if we got rejected by the group, we had to live out in the forest by ourselves. That's it. We're dead. We're, you know, lunch for a bear or for a tiger or whatever it was. So we're hardwired to be really aware of our social approval and our social status. And social media is like that in hyperdrive. So yeah, our brain is kind of primed to keep us alive, accepted by the tribe that we're in. So it's automatically scanned for threats to our survival. So that can be our acceptance or our competence, right? And that can be at the highest levels, that can be criticized or scrutinized by social media, and that can kind of send us into hyperdrive a little bit. So what I would say is just having rules around when to engage and when not to. We don't want to engage if we're in that limbic system, if we're freaked out, if we're feeling stressed and anxious. That's the worst time to look at the comments about, you know, how I performed. The I guess more optimal way, I would say, is just to ignore it. Because, you know, what's the real function of looking at it really? Like, what's the benefit of engaging? But if you do want to engage, do it when you're in a relatively calm, relaxed state, be grounded. And then, yeah, just having some rules and processes around how you want to engage with it. Thinking about what is the actual function of my behavior in engaging in social media. Am I just scanning for threats? And is that actually working for me as a behavior? And is it related to my values of being an umpire and engaging in the community? So, yeah, I wish we had a little bit more time to talk about that. But key takeaways: be clear about what the controllables are in your context. Focus on those. Let go of the uncontrollables as much as possible. Be tough on mindset and tolerant on performance. So being really self-critical doesn't make you better, and just acts as a distraction and wastes your resources. Mental skills: practice these. Practice breathing, grounding. Utilizing some of those breathing strategies in terms of switching off between balls. Develop some pre and post game strategies that help switch off and improve at difficult areas of the role. I think that's really important. Practice managing conflict. I think Murray talked about that really well in the first workshop, as he just figured out, okay, these are the things I have to face. This is how I want to respond. I practice it. I get confident at it. Sweet. And I think that's more important than feeling confident. Right? I need to be actually really good at it, like good at facing conflict and managing those behaviors. And then in terms of the social media, just reflect on how you want to engage in it, what it means for you in the context of umpiring. So I've got some additional resources there. You can check those out when I send through the slides. I've got a liberated mind there, which is about building psychological flexibility. So building a more functional relationship to thoughts and feelings that doesn't, I guess, impact performance as much. There's a book there about mindfulness called Peak Mind. The confidence gap, Russ Harris, again, it's these ideas of acceptance and commitment. And then, yeah, really useful videos there about acceptance and commitment therapy, which is useful in sport and performing contexts. and a website there too. So you can check that out if you're interested. Aside from that, thanks for listening. I don't think we have time for questions, but you can send some through if you like. There's my information. Happy to answer any questions you've got. And if you want some additional support in this area, you can let me know. So thanks everyone online. I appreciate it. Appreciate your engagement. It was really helpful, I think, to have those conversations. Thanks to you guys for showing up too. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.